The national debt. It's one of the most debated numbers in modern economics. Politicians argue about it, news outlets flash giant debt clocks, and you've probably heard it's in the trillions. But what exactly is the national debt? Where does it come from? Who owns it? And the biggest question, should you be worried? Today, we're going to break it all down. From the basics of how governments borrow, to real-world examples of debt gone wrong or gone surprisingly well. Welcome to Unravel, Money and Economics. In this channel, we simplify the world of finance, economics, and money, so you can understand how it all works, no matter your background. Let's start with a simple definition. The national debt is the total amount of money a government owes. It's built up over time from budget deficits, when a government spends more than it earns in a year. Each time the government borrows to cover a shortfall, it adds to the debt. So think of the national debt like a giant credit card balance that carries over year after year. The deficit is the yearly shortfall. The debt is the total of all past shortfalls added together. Most national debts are made up of government-issued bonds. See? Investors buy these bonds, and the government pays interest, then repays the amount later. Governments track this debt carefully. In the US, you can even watch it rise in real time on the US debt clock. But here's the important part. Debt isn't necessarily a bad thing. So why do governments borrow at all? In many cases, it's for the same reason individuals take loans: to cover costs during hard times or to make investments in the future. There are several reasons a government might take on debt: to stimulate the economy during a recession, to invest in infrastructure like roads, bridges, and energy grids, to fund social programs like healthcare, education, and pensions, to respond to emergencies, wars, natural disasters, or pandemics. Take the COVID-19 pandemic, for example. In 2020, governments worldwide borrowed trillions of dollars to issue stimulus checks, expand hospitals, and keep businesses afloat. In the US, that added nearly $5 trillion to the national debt in under 2 years. But many economists agree it was necessary to prevent a complete economic collapse. But even in good times, governments may borrow to fund long-term projects that create jobs and improve quality of life. In those cases, debt can actually pay for itself by boosting future economic growth. Now, who actually owns the national debt? In most countries, debt is split into two categories: public debt and intragovernmental debt. Public debt is held by banks, investment firms, pension funds, individuals, and even foreign governments. Intragovernmental debt is what the government owes itself, like trust funds for Social Security or retirement programs. In the US, about 2/3 of the debt is held by the public. The rest is internal, owed to federal agencies. One common myth is that China owns most of the US debt. In truth, China holds about 4 to 5%. Japan holds even more. The majority is actually owned by US investors, pension funds, and the Federal Reserve itself. Countries buy each other's government bonds because they're considered low-risk investments. In return, they earn steady interest, and they trust that the borrower will pay them back. This trust is key. If that trust disappears, everything changes. Debt grows when governments consistently spend more than they collect in taxes. This happens for many reasons. Mandatory spending programs, like pensions, Medicare, and unemployment, make up a massive part of the budget. In most developed countries, these are legally required and can't easily be cut. Aging populations make this even harder. More retirees mean more government benefits. And with fewer working-age people, governments collect less in taxes. Military and defense spending is another huge cost, especially in countries with large global roles. Then there's interest. As debt grows, so does the cost of paying interest. It becomes a cycle. The more you borrow, the more you owe just to stay current. Finally, political gridlock plays a role. When leaders can't agree on spending cuts or tax reforms, borrowing becomes the fallback. In the US, for example, debt rose from around $6 trillion in 2001 to over $30 trillion today. But here's the twist. Debt isn't always bad. In fact, most economists agree. If used wisely, debt can be a smart investment. The key question is, what's the money used for? If a government borrows to build infrastructure, improve education, or fund innovation, those investments can increase productivity and income. Here are some examples. Building highways reduces shipping costs and traffic congestion. Investing in public education creates a more skilled workforce. Funding new technologies drives innovation and global competitiveness. That kind of debt helps the economy grow, which makes it easier to repay in the future. To judge if a country's debt is sustainable, economists often look at the debt to GDP ratio. That tells you how much a country owes compared to the size of its economy. For example, Japan's debt is over 230% of its GDP, yet investors aren't panicking because most of the debt is held domestically and interest rates are low. In contrast, some developing countries may run into trouble with much lower debt levels, especially if they borrow in foreign currencies. So when does debt become a real problem? Here are a few red flags. 1. Rising interest rates. When borrowing costs go up, more of the budget goes toward interest instead of public services. 2. Loss of investor confidence. If investors think a country won't pay them back, they may demand higher interest or stop lending altogether. 3. Currency risk. If a country borrows in dollars but earns money in pesos, and the peso crashes, the debt becomes much harder to repay. 4. Crowding out. If the government borrows too much, it may compete with businesses for loans, pushing up interest rates across the economy. 5. Political instability. Disputes over debt ceilings, shutdowns, or defaults can shake investor confidence, even if the actual risk of non-payment is low. Let's look at a few real-world case studies. Greece. After the 2008 financial crisis, Greece's debt skyrocketed. Investors lost confidence. Bailouts followed. The country entered years of economic pain and austerity. Argentina has defaulted on its debt multiple times. Political instability and inflation have created a cycle of debt, crisis, and restructuring. Japan has the highest debt-to-GDP ratio in the world. But because most of its debt is owned domestically and interest rates are near zero, it hasn't faced a crisis. United States owes more than any other country in dollar terms, yet it's considered one of the safest places to lend. Why? Because of the size and stability of its economy and the dominance of the US dollar. So the lesson here is simple: context matters. Debt isn't just about how big the number is, it's about trust, structure, and how the debt is managed. So, should you be worried about the national debt? The answer is, it depends. Debt can be helpful or harmful. The key is how much is owed, how fast it's growing, what it's used for, and whether the country can keep the trust of its lenders. If used responsibly, debt can support prosperity. If mismanaged, it can spiral into crisis. Now that you understand the basics of national debt, you'll be able to follow policy debates, economic trends, and financial headlines with a lot more clarity. Have a topic you're curious about? Let us know in the comments, and hit subscribe so you don't miss what's next. As we continue to unravel the world of money and economics, one concept at a time.